Hello everyone, my name is Ipismai, and a few days ago I made a video showcasing this Minecart network that I have been working on. For those of you that haven't seen the video, or just generally had no idea what that video was actually about, uh, this network is made up of these individual stations, or rather junctions, the purpose of which is to combine two minecart tracks into one so that the cart can pass through the junction and then eventually return back to its original track where it came from. And if you want a short demonstration of the system, I suppose I can just push this button and off they go. So as you can see, there's two carts simultaneously entering each junction, but only one of them is allowed to pass until they eventually get to the end of this track, from which the car starts to come backwards, and you can notice that every time the cart returns through a junction, the other cart that was already waiting there is allowed to pass. And what this basically means is, well, here I have 16 different minecart tracks that in the end can be combined into just one track, completely avoiding all collisions and having the minecarts return back to their original tracks. And while this of course looks pretty interesting and on some level may be considered impressive, there were lots of questions regarding whether this sort of system is actually viable for anything and what do you use this for. And I personally theorized in the video description that maybe something like this could be used for, say, if you had some farms at the end of these, that you could deliver the items to a central storage, or maybe you could transport players. And the purpose of this video is to show that this sort of system is actually very useful and can be used to do quite a bit of things. And yeah. So without further ado, let's check out the improved system that actually has functionality attached to it. Okay, so here you can see a similar sort of minecart network in the center there in white. Then there's some rooms attached to some of the endpoints of the network, and then there is this one huge blob of something at the end of the network. So what is my purpose here is to display different sorts of use cases for this sort of network and what it really enables. So if we start with the original farming idea, what I have here is this could be, I don't know, this could really be any farm, but currently it's sort of set up to be like an iron golem farm. And the idea is that the golems would drop in there, and some iron would come out, and it would get into this minecart, and say that there would obviously be some sort of automatic loading system that would detect that once the cart is ready or full, it would be sent off. But currently there's just a button. So when you look into the minecart, you can see that there's obviously the iron, but then there's also this label, and this label says cargo. And what cargo means, it means that once the cart gets to the end of the track, or that section, that all the contents of the cart need to be emptied. So if you push this button, like we currently see that there's 3 iron in the cart. We push the button, the cart goes off its merry way, through the junctions, just like before, and then it arrives here. Something happens over there. Another cart seems to come back. Rolls back to its original place in the system. And when we look inside, okay, there's just a cargo label. All the items are now gone. They're somewhere over there. So I guess we can declare that some sort of item deposit was successful. Next up, let's look at something a bit more advanced. Actually, let's look at this. So, this is the home case. So, let's say that after a long day of mining, you decide to come back home, but your hunger bar is pretty empty and you don't happen to have any steak. You really want to have a steak. You love steak. So, instead of going to find yourself a cow and cook it, what you can do is you can just put a label, get food, into your minecart, push the button. Again, the cart goes along the network into the central system here at the end. It pauses over there, waits there for a second, and again rolls down the track back to its starting position. And when we look inside, there's 8 pieces of delicious steak. That's nice. And the label is still there. So, what you now know is that, okay, you can deposit items and you can retrieve items. This is also really interesting. Or this gets a bit more complicated, rather. So, let's say that we're now in the mine, okay? We have our stash full of nice ores that we have here. Yes, we had a, well, it's a pretty meh haul, but whatever, we just want to send those into the system. But also, we notice that we really are down to our last pickaxe, and we want some iron and maybe some wood to craft ourselves a new pickaxe. So what we do, we currently have a completely empty cart here. We put the items in here, the iron ores, the gold ores, and the cobblestones, and then we mark that we want these to be deposited into the storage, so we put a cargo label into the cart. But also, we want to retrieve ourselves some food, and some wood, and some iron. Okay. Actually, let's just do a full run of the system, and also get redstone. Currently, how I set this up is it supports 4 different items to be retrieved like this. So, we push the button, the cart goes off. Again, we follow it here, goes through the junctions just fine. Goes here. This cart goes to empty its contents, and then the other cart comes over here, fills up with food, fills up with redstone. This probably actually takes a while. Oh, no it doesn't. Fills up with some wood. And finally fills up with some iron. And it drives back along this track, doing that sort of motion, we'll get to that. Returns via again its original path to where it came from. Cool. So now when we look inside, there's the steak, there's the redstone, there's the oak wood, and there's the iron ingots. And all the labels are still here. Okay. So this is pretty cool. We've established that you can hook up farms in it, you can have it deliver items to you, and you can even put labels in the carts to really have anything on demand anywhere. But let's look at one more thing. So what we have here is a sort of imaginary minecart station setup. So maybe you would have some tracks going somewhere, but then you'd also have a track going to the central station. And it turns out that you can actually use the same sort of network for transporting players. So I'm just going to hop into the cart, push a button, and off we go. You can see that the cart doesn't actually wait at the junctions if they are free. And we get over here. This is the central station. So we see the cart returning back to its original state. And what we are going to do next is look at the actual system here on the end, how it works, and basically how this enables us to do all those previous sorts of things. Okay, so let's look at this system here at the end. So, if we follow the path that the minecart takes, first we see that there are some hoppers on the path. If you have ever built any sorting systems, this setup looks probably familiar to you. So what we have is a hopper with a comparator telling how many items are in there, with 2 pieces of redstone wire. If you look inside the hopper, we see that there are some mushrooms, which are filling up the space, and then there's one label, in this case the get iron, and what this means is when a cart that has a get iron label in its inventory drives over this, the label gets deposited into the inventory of the hopper, and this redstone wire here turns to double strength. What this means is that it's just enough to power this block and these two repeaters. And in practice, it turns this junction so that when the cart comes eventually from there, it'll drive into here, where the iron dispenser is. Also, it turns this junction. And what's the purpose of this is when the cart eventually returns back through this track, it will quickly make a stop in here to pick up the label. The way that this is set up is the minecart actually picks only one item from the hopper as it quickly nudges against it, and then it returns back. Okay, so there's 5 of these hoppers, one for each label, shown here: iron, wood, redstone, food, cargo, and then there's this line running back in here. If you are going to have a system that only handles item carts, then you do not need this wire. What this is meant for is so that if you have a cart with no label, then you can send it to a special track. I suppose you could actually use, like if you had a system that was only for items, you could use this to pick up stray carts on the path. Though that would probably still mess with the junctions if the cart never returned. Yeah, it would. But like if somebody accidentally sent 2 carts at the same time, then that would be able to fix it. Still, that's sort of irrelevant currently. So what this thing does is if any of these hoppers is active or has 2 labels in it, which means that there was some sort of item cart going this way, then it turns this junction so that the cart goes down to the item processing lane, or the chest minecart processing lane. Whereas if the cart had no labels in it, then we assume that it's a cart with a passenger in it, so we drive it to the station here. And there's a simple activator rail ejecting the passenger, and then the cart just returns. Okay, so following the actual interesting path here, the chest handling minecart, what we have here is 5 different things, 4 of which are basically the same, and then there's one which is different. So if you look at these things first, since they are the so I suppose they're more simple ones. What these do is they basically just load items into the minecart. So the minecart drives over here, it triggers this, and there is a sort of a very crammed in T flip-flop here with that is connected to a hopper clock. And if you look into the hopper clock, we can see that here is 16 redstone. And what this means is when the cart arrives here, sits under the hopper, it's gonna get 16 items loaded into it. And then, actually, I can just use this card to show it. So it triggers this piston, pushing this redstone block over here. And then this thing quickly pulls, or this thing pulses on, since this hopper is now empty, which powers this rail. And if here was no minecart, or if here was a minecart, it would drive again over this detector rail, which would then flip the clock the other way, and the system would be back to normal. So that's basically what this is. It's just a very, sort of a very simple way to load a certain number of items into a minecart that's sitting on a pressure plate and automatically send it on its way. It should also be noted that when the cart is sitting on this, it forces this junction to be facing this way. Since normally there would be the label inside the hopper giving power to this, or giving no power to this line, which would mean that this would be facing that way. Obviously, if you are going to build this in any other orientation than which way we're currently facing, towards positive X, yeah, okay, let's assume that that is the front side of this place. Then you might need to worry about the orientations a bit of these junctions. But at least if you were to build it like this, then it would work just fine. Okay. So the other sort of thing that we have here is the cargo unloader. And this is really more complicated than it needs to be if you want a minimum viable thing. So what we have here is a little loop with chest minecart sitting in here. And the purpose of the chest minecart is that, say that if you have a really full minecart, there's like tons of items in it, and it drives in here, and it starts unloading. Well, if we didn't have the secondary minecart here, we would have to wait all the way until it's unloaded, and only then we could send it back, which means that this junction would be in use for a really long time, assuming that the next minecart would be something little that's like not really critical. So the purpose of this is that when there's a cart comes in, it drives here to unload itself, but also it triggers this detector rail that sends this already or previously emptied cart along this track. So even if you send a really full cart to unload here, it means that the system is almost immediately usable again, even though the actual unloading takes time. If you wanted to optimize the minecart unloading, you would probably have like multiple of these here to make it so that if you have like multiple different farms, then they wouldn't clog up the system. Okay, and well, yeah. So the cart comes here, it may unload itself, it may load some stuff in it, goes along this track, down here, and then it nudges against those hoppers. And that's basically the whole loop. So, some points of note here. This thing, it's actually expandable. You can make this, like, put these next to each other, as many as you like. There's really no limit to it. And if you look at these and thinking, yeah, like these loaders are great and this unloader is great, but I want something else, then it's like, yeah, you definitely can have. Like, these things don't need to have like any sort of really logic in them. I was thinking about making maybe making a third sort of system that would be like a gambling system, that if you put a label in a card that was like gamble, it could like check if there's a diamond in the cart, and if there is, then it takes the diamond, and then when the card, then it has a chance to put like 3 diamonds in it or something. So like the thing is, you can attach really anything to these that you want, and this is where the actual functionality of the system resides. So yeah, and what's the real value behind it, or why would you even want to build something like this, is that, say if you have some sort of thing here, say that you have the storage here and maybe a food delivery, and you want food delivered to you often, and you want to unload your inventory to central storage often. So what you could do is you could just implement these two things and then build this sort of network around your base and have all these or different sorts of cart points. Like, just take a chest minecart. Like all over it. And then what you could do, you have some crap in your inventory, you put all of that in there, you stick a cargo label in there, and say that I am in dire need of some food, so I also stick a food label in there. And now I can send this off. Instead of like actually trekking anywhere myself, I can just use this. And then after some time it comes back. Like, of course, if you probably noticed, this is not the fastest system. And it's really better, or it's really best not to use it like a item requester on demand, but it's better to do it so that you have these cards already here, and now that you just take the steak away, and instead of letting it sit here empty waiting for the next time, you just send it on its way already. And then when you next time need some food, you come here and you have the food in your minecart. So yeah, I suppose that is the most of the system. I probably will not be making any sort of tutorial how to build this. I would like to tell that, yeah, well, just from watching this video you should be able to see it, but that might not be the case. So I'm just going to give you some closer looks at these 2 different components here, or basically that area and this area, to showcase how these things work. So here's the detector rails. Here's some power rails. Wait. Okay. Those should actually be powered by default, but it doesn't seem to matter because the detector rails power them. Anyways, here's the actual logic. So What you have here is a memory latch, same on the other side, and then there's one down here that's per default inverted. And when a minecart comes over, give me a minecart. It first hits this detector plate, it doesn't matter, then it triggers this, and it turns this torch on here. Now even if another one came on the other side, it couldn't turn the track on because, well, this bottom layer is preventing it from. But once this cart returns from here and drives over this detector rail, then this cart would be allowed to go forward. It's like not that difficult to understand the concept of, it just takes a little bit of time to actually figure out how to implement it using just redstone blocks. And then when you have this first thing down, then you can just chain it to other things. It doesn't matter how much track there is between the blocks themselves. Of course, if you build, or if you have a large system, then it's probably good to have at least a couple of these junctions close to the actual endpoint, so it will make this part less of a bottleneck. But if you had like some really far away station, then you, with a couple of minecart stations there, then you would probably want to have your own junction there and then run just a single line of track all the way here, or close to your central station. Okay, so that was the singular junction, and now let's look at this thing. So here on the hopper side, we have a comparator, some redstone running, 2 repeaters, and then there's 2 wires here. There's a block, a block, and there's a torch under it powering this junction. And the hopper is actually facing this way. Like if you take the sign away, then you can see that here's the little bump, which means that it can actually load the carts. Then under here, the wire runs over there, being able to control these junctions. And well, I suppose that's really all there is about that part of the logic. And then finally there are these loaders. Now these you shouldn't actually even need to know how to build, since you can just build whatever you want on these tracks. Like if I wanted to make, say, some sort of new gadget here, I would just continue this track. Like instead of having this here, I would just have this track go here, and then I could have something that does something with the items in the minecart, or well, anything you want really. And then just return it here. Like you don't need to worry about the cart collisions or anything over here, since thanks to this junction only letting one cart in at a time, it's already limiting the carts flowing in. But anyways, if you want to look into this, there's like a pressure plate here, or a detector rail runs into this thing. This is just a 1-tick pulse generator. And then here's the T flip-flop. It works by sticky piston only, or if a sticky piston only extends for a single tick, then it doesn't pull back the block, which means it keeps switching the state of this redstone block. And then there's a basic hopper clock, which is 2 hoppers running into each other's. Then we're measuring the other hopper through a block using a comparator, and if this hopper is empty, then it means that the clock has run out, so we need to send in the minecart off, so we give this rail some power. Yes. Okay, if there are some further questions you would like to know about this thing, then please feel free to ask me in the comment section. I will probably be reading it, unless it's like multiple weeks since I uploaded this video, then I probably won't be. And well, I don't know if I will be doing anything more with this sort of system, or even if I will be uploading videos, but on the off chance that I will be, and you would be interested, then I suppose that you could use the YouTube subscribe button, but I really want to have no promises.